What would it be to make Nigeria diversify properly or in depth?
But Nigeria has been away from oil for a long time. I mean, it's a myth. Oil is less than 10% of GDP, maybe less than 5% today. Nigeria is not an oil-dependent country. Government revenues are driven by oil prices, and we've got to diversify our exports, and I think we're now having non-oil exports increase because of the exchange rate situation, and we're getting more competitive. We've got to work on the quality of exports and access to markets. If we want to sell Nigerian goods abroad, we've got to make sure they meet the specifications of the consumer, and that requires regulation, it requires controls, it requires certification, and that work needs to be done. But in terms of the GDP, services, financial services, telecommunication services, information technology, education and healthcare, those sectors have grown significantly in the last few decades. So there has been significant diversification of production away from oil. What we need to do is diversify sources of government revenue and reduce the correlation between oil and non-oil revenue, because we often forget that when oil revenue goes up, we also tend to import more and we have import duties, and therefore when oil prices go down, you have a reverse. So reduce that correlation, have more sources with diversifying the tax base, with improving, with widening the tax net, with relying more on domestic income and production, you reduce those vulnerabilities.
Now, as we're talking about reducing vulnerabilities, now we've seen the shock effect of the removal of petrol subsidy up until today. And many of us, or Nigerians, are still very skeptical or unsure whether or not that decision was made too hastily or all at once. In your fair assessment of the implications of removing the fuel subsidy, would you say that, that Nigeria has done, or the government have done so far so well, so good when it comes to mitigating the impact on the vulnerable population of Nigeria?
You know, there's a kind of poetic justice here. When I was governor of Central Bank in 2011, we advised the president to remove fuel subsidies. Subsidies were removed, and some people went on demonstration, Occupy Nigeria, opposed it, and now they're in government and they've had to do it because that's the reality. Those subsidies needed to go. What the president did was absolutely necessary. And my experience with these things is, if you say you're going to remove subsidies gradually in this country, the vested interests and those who have profited from subsidy will make it difficult for you to complete it. Even with the President Jonathan, when we started, the negotiations were with Labour, where we would remove 50% of the subsidies and then remove the rest later. But once we took that first step, that was the end. So the decision to remove the subsidy, yes, it was shocking, and it was a shock treatment, shock therapy. It would have disruptive effects. But if it had not been done when it was done, I don't think it would have been done at all. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that we have always known that if you remove the subsidies, you're going to have inflation, you're going to have an impact on the poor and vulnerable. But what was the alternative? You had reached a point where we had finished using our revenues, we were now borrowing to pay subsidy. We had gotten to a point, if you remember, in 2023, where 100% of government revenue was going to service debt. The country was bankrupt. Where were we going to pay the subsidy from? We were on the brink of economic collapse. The Naira was on a free fall. So the idea of liberalizing the Naira, tightening money, removing the subsidy to stabilize the economy pulled us back from the brink. Think of Venezuela under Chavez. Think of Zimbabwe under Mugabe. Think of Uganda under Idi Amin. This is where we were headed if we had not pulled back from the brink. So there is a lot of pain, there's a lot of suffering. But what I say is that the pain and suffering would have been much, much worse if we had continued, because ultimately those subsidies would have to go. If we had done this 10 years ago, 15 years ago, this pain would not have been what it was.